Today, my friends, you're in for a treat for one or two or three reasons, really. First of all, Jon Novakowski is here, and Jon's the Chief Visionary Officer for Vector Tech Group. This was an awesome conversation. Vector's one of our partners. They've been a longtime partner. Jon's been a very key instrumental part to not only the Ruckus business, but Vector as well, obviously, and all of their customers. We had a great conversation. This was a long time in the making, almost a year. And I'm not going to do a long introduction because I asked Jon to introduce himself during the podcast. I'm also not going to tell you what we talked about because if I did that here, why would you listen? So there you go. Win-win. Great conversation coming up. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Jon, I feel like it's been about a year of us trying to get this thing put together and get together and record this podcast. And I don't know, that's probably my fault. But either way, thanks for joining, man. It's good to have you.
Yeah, pleasure chatting with you, Matt. And it has been it's been a while, man. So I've been looking forward to chatting with you.
Yeah, it'll be fun. So normally what I do, because folks are internal, so I pester them until they send me a little bio and then I record an intro. But this one, I think it's probably more important for you. I guess tell us who you are, what you do, who you're with.
All right. So, my name is Jon Novakowski. I am Chief Visionary Officer for Vector Tech. I am responsible for giving direction and forward-thinking projects, products, resources to the company. I'm also the senior wireless engineer for the company, so it's kind of a dual role for me, but something that I've always wanted to keep my finger in and being abreast of what I love is Wi-Fi and Wi-Fi networks, and so that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. So for anybody that hasn't figured it out yet, Jon, obviously you're with one of our partners, which we appreciate you to no end, right? So coming from that world a little bit, what has your Ruckus experience been like?
Yeah, so I've been with Ruckus since 2009. We were actually a company that I owned and merged into our new Vector company called eGear USA. Was the first channel partner for Ruckus Wireless in 2009 when Selena brought it over from the IPTV space. I got heavily involved in educational networks and have gone up through quite a bit of changes with Ruckus over these many years, and have always found them to bounce back and get back on their feet and do better. We're heavily involved in pretty much all different assets and facets of Ruckus and who they are, from executive management meetings on a quarterly basis with Pramod to each one of the division heads, each one of the PLMs. Vector was pretty instrumental in bringing the NMS side of Ruckus together and worked with actually Marcus Burton way back in the day and helping develop and giving breadth and direction to that. We became a beta tester and what I call an alpha tester now of getting in at the same time as engineering and working through all the different platforms. We're about 6 months to 9 months ahead of any technology that's coming out with Ruckus and putting it through its paces.
So this is where I have to tread kind of careful because I'm not trying to throw mud at anyone. That's really not my intent. But look, I mean, the reality is, right, you do this long enough, you're going to interact with different products, technologies, vendors, things like that. You know, from your viewpoint and having such a broad exposure to things, what's really kind of gotten you to stick with the Ruckus brand, and what is it that you see in it that really just isn't as an outperformer?
Yeah, so I've gone and grown up through what wasn't the commodity phase of beam forming way back in the day, which then turns into beam flex. And that was one of the things that really caught my eye with Ruckus way back in the day. But as the world became more of a commodity play inside of networks and infrastructures itself, once the nostalgia and marketing and all of that stuff really started to wipe off, some of the things that really kept us with Ruckus and really looking at the direction of Ruckus, honestly, was one of the company's ability and willingness to listen to partners on the ground. I can't tell you and stress how many manufacturers we've worked with that have ignored the VARs, the people that actually install it and support it and promote it. Where Ruckus, Brocade, Broadcom, Airs, that everything inside of there has always come back to Jon and to Vector and said, tell me what needs to change. And I've seen so many of the things and features and ideas over many years. Those changes have been made, they've been implemented, and they cared and care about the people that are actually doing the deployments. So I would say that's my first and foremost real love for Ruckus as a company is their willingness and wanting to know what makes a better product for the people that actually use it than just sales numbers. On top of that, Ruckus has always maintained a awesome breadth of styles of equipment. If you look at their outdoor access point line, it's not just one AP, there's multiple APs. When you look at their ICX line, there's multiple different platforms. You look at all the different controller interfaces that are out there, and there's one that fits every spot. So having the ability to have an a la carte menu like that plays so well with each other has been instrumental in our decision making ability of what manufacturer we rep.
It's interesting that you bring that up because just to give you a piece of history, I come from, excuse me, I come from the Brocade side, and my background is wired. I mean, I've dealt with wireless. I think if you're a network engineer, you're going to deal with both at a certain point in your life or your career. But coming from the Brocade side, and it was, I joined shortly after the Foundry acquisition. I don't know how long it was into it, but, you go through that piece and then you go through all these other acquisitions, including up to the Ruckus acquisition. And one thing that I always noticed was Brocade was such a channel driven business. Foundry necessarily wasn't. So there was this huge curve that had to go into it when we went through that. And one thing that was never lost sight of was the amount of importance that everybody emphasized on the channel, on the VARs, things like that. That never went away. So we kind of went through the growing pains with the Foundry piece of it and got all that sorted out. And then when the Ruckus piece came in, it was just like second nature. All cylinders were firing, just ran ready to go. And it's been extremely similar with the CommScope acquisition too, because of, you have these channel presences that are already there and built. Look, you can't build something like that and have partners like yourself and then ignore the value. And so I'm not trying to play cheerleader. I think it's really important to tie to, and we're not perfect. Nobody is, right? So certain things are going to fall through the cracks at certain times. But that's one thing I've always noticed is that the channel is very well cared for and very well understood internally. People get it, right? Look, there are channel partners here that are important. You have to pay attention to them. So, and you guys are obviously no different. So that's definitely good to hear. I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah, one of the crazy things that I didn't never think that I would be a part of was when CommScope did the acquisition. They actually brought me in, and I met with CommScope's and Ruckus's marketing divisions and teams, and started talking about what that all looked like. I'm a proponent of black and orange and the dog, right? Because that's what I grew up with. So trying to, understand where CommScope's branding was coming from and versus the Ruckus branding and being a part of that. I just, I never expected them to even listen to me on a marketing piece and what that all looked like. And now I look at CommScope's site and it's got a lot of black on it and a lot of orange on it. So it's been an interesting and transition to be a part of that.
Well, the dog is back too, so they've brought that dog back. It's funny. I talked to some folks with marketing. We actually recorded a podcast. It was Dawn and Dana, and I talked to them about how do you take three companies with completely diverse portfolios and bring them all together and brand it. And so it was a really interesting conversation because that's a challenge I don't want to face ever in my entire. That's why I'm not in marketing because I would screw that thing up to no end. But what they did really made a lot of sense, and that's why there were so many colors in it. But it was really interesting to see how much impact that dog had. Yeah. And so having it come back in, I think everybody kind of breathed the collective sigh of relief, like, oh, the dog. And don't get me wrong, I love dogs as much as anybody. But I've never seen so many people up in arms over a dog.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was a pride issue. We believed in that, that product and what it stood for way back in the day, and that's always been, who Ruckus has been to us. So having that mascot leading the charge, I think was an invaluable piece to maintain.
Yep, and I'm glad it stayed too. And you shouldn't be surprised that they're bringing you in and taking your feedback on that. I mean, you can't carry a title Chief Visionary Officer and then actually be surprised when somebody listens to what you're saying.
Yeah, it's kind of cool though. I mean, that's it's been a pretty awesome title of having that, and I think one of the reasons that was given to me was because I'm an engineer by trade. I'm not a sales or a marketing person. I'm an engineer. I'm deploying networks, and I got some ideas and feelings and directions of where I think technology heads. So it's kind of cool, an honor.
So let me ask you about this. I think everybody's a little. I say this every time, and then I still ask the question. So you tell me who's the smart one in this conversation, but. How was your 2020? I mean, I know it was a challenge, right? But if you're doing a lot of deployments, were you still kind of in the thick of that, or did you have to reassess how you approach that stuff? How was it?
Well, I think everybody kind of had to reassess. I mean, even the big dogs of Amazon, we lost our 2-day Prime, right?
Mm-hmm.
Vector held very well. We've always had a diverse customer base. Our public venues and things like that still in shutdown mode. Obviously that business went down, but our financial sectors, our DoD sectors, our healthcare sectors all went up. So it balanced itself very, very nicely. We were very, very fortunate to have a financially stable and smart management team where we didn't have to go through the layoffs or the sales or the salary reductions or anything else like that. We've always made a commitment to our employees and to our company to be solvent and solvable and so 2020 wasn't as bad as it could have been, and it wasn't as bad as I've seen a lot of businesses that have been really hurt by it. And I find that we're very, very fortunate to had the positioning and have the positioning in that.
That's awesome to hear, because that's always the thing. And we've talked about it. I mean, there's 30-40 million people out of work, and being able to keep the lights on and keep plugging away and keep moving it's very, very fortunate. So I'm very happy to hear that. And this is one of those things too. I mean, if anything, human beings are pretty resilient, right? I mean, we've been through, just in the time I've been around, there's been some pretty interesting things that have happened in the world, and we find a way to fight through them and get through it and kind of keep moving forward. So I'm glad to hear that. I really am.
Yeah.
So let me ask you something, because one thing I'm always curious about is we put all this technology together and you've got all these different features, and products anymore are very, very feature rich, whereas the majority of customers use like 10 to 15 to 20% of those features, right?
Yeah, 100%.
What are probably some of the top features within, say, Smart Zone that you're using day in and day out, where you're seeing the most success with?
Yeah, so for sure the network management side, the integration of the wired and wireless side, the templated, easy to deploy, zero touch deployments, the monitoring, troubleshooting, 100%. Um, uh, the deployments and having everything being able to be pre-staged to run efficient deployments has really cut down on our additional hours that we've had to kick in to projects and make it run with. I, you look at all the automation pieces of scheduling backups for your ICX environment, or even the smart zone itself, have been just an absolute godsend in our deployments and management. To go outside of smart zone, we've been really harping and focusing a lot on Ruckus analytics, and what kind of mean time to resolutions is what our service department calls it. How do we troubleshoot environments? How do we prove that it's not the wired or wireless networks is always in our head, and Ruckus Analytics has jumped leaps and bounds in that stage and field and abilities, especially for an MSP. I mean, we have a very, very large MSP practice, and being able to look at multiple different networks at any given time and be able to jump in and troubleshoot or monitor or put up SLAs, I think has been massively impactful.
Smart Zone is one of those products that made me eat crow. Um, well, because like I have a wired background, right? So I've lived in CLIs my entire life, and I've used UI interfaces for things. Cisco had Cisco Works, and
Yep.
Brocade had Network Advisor, and I fought through that stuff for a long time, and I guess I was a little jaded towards them because there were just things that I felt like weren't there, were too clunky, were missing. And so I finally had heard everybody running around talking about how awesome Smart Zone was. And I was like, I don't know if I buy it. I'm a skeptic, blah, blah, blah. Wham, let me go get on my soapbox and cry some more. And then I got into it and I realized, well, crap, I have to eat crow here, because it really is, I think, the one thing that we've always talked about. And coming from an education perspective, where you're in front of classes and you're teaching and you're kind of going through it, you're always trying to find that one thing that eases that pain or burden of somebody new coming in to look at it. And the easiest thing I've ever been able to find with it is it tells a story. You can look at it and you know where to go. You don't have to sit there and click through 10 screens to find one thing that is in the wrong place. It's always just kind of been this very well-built picture that you can just click through real quick and find what you're looking for. And that's coming from an idiot, because that's basically what I am. And if I can fight my way through it, experts like yourself, I'm sure you can make that thing absolutely sing. So that's what I've always found with it, which was a relief too. I mean, I'd like to be able to say, hey, we did this very, very well. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the logical flow, and I'll even go back before Smart Zone, even in Zone Director days. I used to put up demos where I'd bring in a George Foreman grill in my lunch, my sandwich, and I would plug in the George Foreman grill, get it hot, put my sandwich on, and go through an unboxing and full configuration of the system before my sandwich would burn. So I mean, the logical flow is absolutely imperative with Ruckus. So it's actually one of the things that we've been working very diligently with Ruckus Engineering on 6.0, which is obviously going to be their new GUI refresh, and what does that look like? And some of the features we put in there were legacy view, right? Like the ability to go back in and slowly move over. But I mean, even just to talk about, where they've come on the switch side, I mean, Ease of use of scheduling configuration backups. Boom, you don't have to worry about it anymore. Scheduling firmware updates. I mean, I used to set my alarm, for 2 o'clock in the morning to go up and do firmware updates, and now I can schedule. That's just massive.
Huge.
With the integration of the CLI now in the GUI, and you being a wired guy from back in the day, you're not looking at your spreadsheet to try to figure out what switch and what IP it is. You just go into the system and click, more, and go down to CLI, and boom, you're in the CLI now doing your rock star stuff. And it's a balance, an integration between the CLI and the GUI people now, and I think it's form and function is definitely there.
Yeah, that I guess I didn't realize I had PTSD from that part of my life, but you just triggered me on that one. There's only two things that'll trigger me, and one of them is, why does my refrigerator need an IP address? But that's besides the point. So one of the cool things too is, because I've worked here for a number of years, but this is the first and only vendor I've worked for, so I've always been a customer. And I know we drove a lot of how do I put this? Features are usually driven by, or enhancements are driven by, one of two things, right? Either a defect or customer partner feedback. And that's always really, really critical. But when you look back at all the time you've spent in this hardware and software, what do you think some of the key features that you were helped behind driving to make sure that they landed in the product?
Yeah, for sure. Like I mentioned before, the integration of the ICX inside of the VSC, making one single pane of glass, was a pretty big milestone for us. Actually, when Smart Zone was being developed from 3.4 to 5.0, we were instrumental in the GUI design and how that all looked and formed and functioned. If you go back and you look at 3.4, 3.5, and then you go to 5.0, that was a massive redesign inside of there. Some of the ways that the tabs are appearing on the left side, or the boxes and the logical flow of where different abilities inside of there were very spearheaded by Vector. Quite a bit of the firewalling and breaking that out from the services and profiles and putting it into its own container was a Vector initiative inside of there. So yeah, those are just a couple things that pop out in my mind.
It's so cool to be in your position, because you have not only such a long storied experience with it, but also so much impact that's been put into it. I think that's really cool. I really do.
Yeah, we feel very, very fortunate. Every time I get off the call with a PLM or with engineering, I'm just really so thankful that somebody's listening to somebody that uses their product every single day.
Yeah, because that's a huge problem. There's a lot of people that don't.
Yeah.
That's terrifying. Here's what's really cool. So on a lot of the live stream stuff we do, I've covered Ansible, I've covered Smart Zone. I haven't gone into detail of Python scripting that we use internally, but I mean, we have labs built, right? And so one of the labs that I have is we churn that thing to do multiple different things. And, we get into these conversations during either a podcast or a live stream event where, is this the end all be all? And I'm like, well, what are your goals? That's really what comes into it. Because now when you look at things like Smart Zone, like you said, it's the single pane of glass. And there's actually jokes internally where anytime somebody says single pane of glass, they have to drink. So that's 2 right there, or 3, because you said it as well. But there's that piece of it, right? In terms of management, holy moly, does it make your life easier. But then you also look at things like Ansible, and most networks aren't built with 5 or 10 devices. Most of them are built with 500 to 5,000, right? They're very large. So how do you push these changes out? Well, Ansible starts to buy you that. And then you also look at all the introduction of APIs and things like that. And what a lot of the guys internally are working very diligently on. Do you have that one single place where you can solve everything? No, not always. I mean, can you eventually get there? Sure, it'll take some time and patience. But do we have all of the tools in place to give you that full package? Yes. So, I mean, that's what I always bring this up. I mean, you build a piece of hardware and you write the software that goes into it, and you introduce these features, and then you let it loose into the wild, and you see what people come up with and do with it. It's mind numbing. I mean, just seeing some of the things that people have pulled off with networks. Some of them you're not really sure how they even work, but some of them you realize, wow, that you really made that thing scream. It's really cool to see, and I know you're doing the same thing, so it's really awesome.
Yeah, we're a huge PowerShell shop, and have built a lot of integrations for us on the back end as far as network conversions. We've written tools that take Cisco, Aruba, or any of our competitors out there and take their language, reformat it into ICX, and allows us to have basically a plug and play deployment using our templates and our predefined batch imports and the rest of that. So it's been pretty cool to have those abilities and the openness of the Ruckus APIs to allow us to do that.
So then I need a favor, because you have all of this industry influence. YAML is awesome. I love it. But I need you to do me one of two things. Either tell whoever's in charge of YAML to not make it so picky with where a space or a tab or whatever is, or make me smart enough to figure it out. I don't care which one.
Yeah, that's why we started just building our own on the back end. Some manufacturers listen to you and some don't. So, but yeah, it's been pretty cool to be able to build things out and script them in the back end, and have the Ruckus system just pick up and run. We did a rip and replace for a customer. It was 170 switches, and we did that in 10 days using this templated PowerShell. Yeah, no downtime, no VLAN configuration issues, no problem. So we were pretty impressed with that. It actually took us longer to rack and stack than it did to do the config.
That is awesome. That's a huge undertaking. I mean, I know if somebody's listening to this, they're touching hardware and software and they get it, but 170 devices in 10 days, that's huge. It really is. So congratulations. That's amazing.
Thank you.
So are you looking forward to this year? You got a lot of stuff on the burner you're ready to get cracking on?
Yeah, 21 has already started to shape up to be a really good year. We're super excited to get back into our public spaces again. I for one am desperate to go see a concert again, or just get out and well, we're in Michigan, so we're still in restaurant lockdown for another week or so, but just start getting into those environments. We've seen a really good uptick on our client basis. We are very, very heavily vested in COVID policies, procedures. So it's been really hard to make those personalized handshakes and go out and meet people. And we're still able to do some of that, but Zoom and virtualization has brought a whole different avenue to personalizing or trying to personalize relationships with people. And being able to reach out. But, on a business side, it's also made us much more effective time managers, right? You don't get into, the meetings that go, an hour, 2 hours beyond. And I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it becomes very inflexive of people's time, and having the ability to move from one subject to the next subject. But still having a time to chat with somebody, get to know them. I think it's reached a lot more people in sales cycles than we would have seen in the past. Just trying to get face to face and coordinating the schedules. It's a lot easier to say I'll see you at 10 a.m. Knowing that you don't have to get there and present, and make sure that the projector's working and the rest of that. So I look at 21 as takeaways of 20 that we learned how to do very effective, very well. We've learned to be a remote workforce. We've learned to, and I think a lot of our staff, at least, has learned to be very effective in that remote working environment, and has very much enjoyed. As sad as the situation happened, but it is now really enjoying the ability to have lunch with a loved one that they would have probably never have done in the past. You're able to walk out and make a sandwich and talk to somebody, and then walk back in and go right back to work. It's you're not scheduling it out weeks and months ahead of time for that one little thing. It can be more impromptu now. So
Yep.
We're hopeful for the economy. Every economy right now in the world is suffering. There's not anyone that I can see that's just going gangbusters and jumping up and down, that they have more money than they know what to do with. So I think being smart, being effective, cost efficient, but really now is our time to be forward thinking, right? Like what does an investment in 21 look like versus in 19? And how long does that investment need to have, before you get an ROI on it? Speaking from an end user's point of view, if they're gonna pony up to making a change now, they need to know that change is going to take them through the financial hardship of 2020, right? That was not an easy thing.
Yep, 100%. Where I'm with you on the concert thing. Like, I want to go to a concert, a baseball game, something. I want to be able to cough or sneeze in public and not have somebody spray me with Lysol too.
It's such a weird feeling, because like you're gonna tickle in your throat and you're like, oh no.
Oh no. I know. It's awful.
Oh no.
So true. Where in Michigan are you?
We're south of Grand Rapids by about 30 minutes.
Do you ever go to Traverse City for the Cherry Festival?
Absolutely.
Amazing.
Absolutely.
So
I love Traverse City. Its own little metropolis out in the middle of nowhere.
Yep.
You crest the hill and you see the town and you're like, there's civilization.
Yeah, there's definitely, I'd say 99% of the stories of me going up there to hang out with a buddy of mine, I could never tell, especially on a podcast. But there was one that was pretty funny. We went to they had concerts and stuff up there, and Reba McEntire was up there one year, and we were sitting there hanging out and watching her, and some dude in the crowd just jumps up and screams at the top of his lungs in the middle of a song, "I love you, Reba." And so she just picked her mic up and looked at him and she goes, "Honey, it sounds like somebody's had too many cherries." That's pretty funny. Jon, I hate to do this. I actually have to run. But one thing I'd love to do is I'd love to have you come back and chat more, especially after 6.0 releases, because I'd like to see kind of how that has gone for you and some transition stuff there. And you have a standing invite. I'd love to have you back anytime.
Well, I appreciate the time and hanging out with you, Matt. It was good chatting with you.
Yeah, let's not let almost a year pass this time before we get this thing going again.
I love that idea, man.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I can't wait to talk to you again.
Sounds good. Thanks so much, Matt.
All right, bud. Take care. Thanks. See you, everybody.
Thank you for listening to Ruckcast. If you just found us for the first time, be sure to follow or subscribe on your platform of choice so you can be notified of future episodes. If you have ideas for future episodes or can't find Ruckcast on your favorite platform, contact us at ruckcast@comscope.com. And as always, thanks for listening.